So, have all of you heard about emptiness before? Or is it like totally new, something you never heard of before? Anyone who's hearing about it for the very first time?
First time.
First timers. Like you never heard about it before. Okay, so you all know something about it. But anyway, it's good to hear about it again and again, and read about it and think about it and discuss it, because it is a difficult topic, and normally it does take time to get an understanding of it. So the first point on the handout, letter A, what is the reason for studying and meditating on emptiness? So emptiness, the way it's explained in Buddhism, I mean, the word emptiness can mean different things to different people, you know, like existential emptiness. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Buddhist view of emptiness. And so the term emptiness is used to refer to the true nature of things, the actual way that things exist, everything. So it's a quality, we could say. It's a quality that exists in everything. Lamayesh used to kind of joke with us. He said, you shouldn't think emptiness is somewhere up in space, you know, like outer space. We have to go traveling in space to find emptiness. It's not like that. Emptiness is actually right here all the time. It's with us all the time. It's in front of us all the time, around us all the time. It's right here. But the problem is that we don't see it. We don't experience it. And that is because our mind has a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings, which are a bit like veils. You could think of it like a veil that's covering our mind and not allowing us to see things as they really are. So it's here already. We just have to figure out how to see it, how to experience it. And the reason for doing this, the first point says, the realization of emptiness is the main antidote to ignorance. Ignorance is the root of all our problems. So the Buddha, if you know something about the story of the Buddha, he was once ignorant. He wasn't always Buddha. He wasn't always enlightened. He was ignorant like us. But he wanted to find a way to be free of suffering. He became aware of suffering in the world and around him, but also in himself. And he really wanted to see if it was possible to stop suffering, to end suffering. So he set out on this spiritual journey, a spiritual quest, to see if he could do that. And he was successful. He had to work really hard, and he went through a lot of hardships, a lot of difficulties, but he finally reached what he was looking for. He got the experience that he was looking for, which was enlightenment or awakening, a state of being free of all suffering. And so what he realized was that the very root problem, the very root cause of all our suffering is ignorance, not seeing things as they are, not seeing reality. And because of that, as the sort of foundation, then we have other attitudes, like disturbing emotions like greed or craving, desire, grasping, that kind of attitude. And we also have the opposite, which is like hatred, aversion, you know, wanting to push things away that we don't like, or even do something harmful to them. Fear, jealousy, pride, so all these kind of disturbing attitudes in our mind, they are all rooted in ignorance, not seeing things as they are. So the way to clear up this mess, all these disturbing emotions and all the suffering that they cause, is to eliminate ignorance. And the way to eliminate ignorance is to realize emptiness, the true nature of things. So it's the way to be free of suffering and the way to attain the real goals of the spiritual path in Buddhism, which are liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering, and enlightenment or Buddhahood. So that's the highest state that can be achieved, the state that the Buddha achieved, enlightenment. And it's not just free of suffering and its causes, but also all the good qualities of the mind, like love and compassion and patience and generosity and so forth. So all these positive qualities that we have, but our love and so forth are not like fully developed and fully perfected. They're kind of sometimes there, sometimes not, and I'm feeling for some people, but not for everybody, and so on. So we're sort of in an imperfect state. So in the mind of a Buddha, these positive qualities are like fully developed and fully perfect and pure. So a Buddha can feel love for everybody all the time. Not on and off, but constantly. Every single person, every single being. Nothing but love and compassion. So that's another aspect of being a Buddha, having all these positive qualities. And the whole purpose of becoming a Buddha isn't just to sit there and enjoy yourself, but to be able to help others. So then a Buddha is able to work continuously and forever, as long as it takes, until every other being has become free of suffering and reached enlightenment as well. So it's really a marvelous state, and we have the ability, the potential to reach that state. But we can't reach it unless we understand emptiness. Yeah, so understanding emptiness enables us to be free of our suffering and problems, but also to develop our potential, our highest potential, so that we can make our life, our existence beneficial for ourselves, beneficial for others. So it's very, very important, very crucial to understand emptiness. And that's why it's so important that our motivation, it's always good to check the motivation for wanting to learn about emptiness. That it shouldn't, ideally, it shouldn't just be intellectual curiosity. Wow, that's a really cool idea. I really want to understand that, sort of stimulating our mind, our brain. Or worse than that would be wanting to show off to others, oh yeah, I understand emptiness, impress others with our understanding. So that kind of attitude, that kind of motivation wouldn't be right. So look out for that, and always try to remind yourself that it's to benefit others, to benefit the world, to benefit all beings. So, yeah, so Buddha explained in his teachings based on his own experience. So the Buddha's teachings are not like philosophy, like in the Western philosophy. I haven't studied philosophy, so I'm not an expert on that. But I think it's, people just think. Philosophers think about things and they come up with these ideas. But I'm not sure if the ideas they have are really based on any kind of first-hand experience, or it's just more a product of rational thinking. And, yeah, anyway. But in the case of we do say Buddhist philosophy. We talk about Buddhist philosophy. But it's not that kind of thing. It's not just Buddha thought of all these ideas, but rather he meditated. He looked into his own mind, his own experience, and had these amazing experiences, really transformative experiences. So his teachings are based on that, based on first-hand experiences of looking into himself, looking into his mind, understanding things, and transforming his mind, transforming his experience. So he discovered it is possible to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering and achieve these amazing states of mind. So he's talking about his own experience and saying, you can do it too. You can do it as well. It's It's not just, it's not like I'm somebody special and, you know, nobody else can do what I did, but you can do it too. And yeah, so again, his experience was that all the problems, both our own individual problems, each one of us has our own problems, but also problems that exist in a family, in a community, in society, in a country, in a world. So communal problems, global problems that, you know, we all experience. So all of these can be traced to ignorance. So ignorance is like the root. And I don't know for about you, but for me that itself is quite significant, to say that the root of suffering lies within our own mind. It's a lack of knowing, a lack of understanding. Because I was raised in Catholicism, and so we talk about the devil, you know, and it's like all evil, all bad things in the world come from the devil. So if we have bad thoughts in our mind, it's the devil. The devil made me do it. The devil made me think that, you know. So it's like something external to ourselves, yeah? And that's kind of a handicap in a way, because you can't do anything about the devil. I mean, even God couldn't get rid of him. He just threw him into hell, but, you know, he couldn't kind of stop him. So if even God couldn't stop the devil, then how can we? So it's like he's always going to be there, and always, you know, having the potential of you know, getting us to think bad thoughts and do bad things. So there's not much you can do about that, except just try to, you know, not let yourself fall under that influence. So there's a kind of helplessness there that we can't really, you know, get out of. Does that idea exist in Judaism as well? Do you also have that idea? Of some external evil.
There is a sort of a kind. More or less the same idea. Some version.
There is self-blame, but not.
There's what?
There is self-blame, but not.
Self-blame?
Shame. But it's not external. It's not because it's
some external force. Yeah, I mean, there also may be different ideas in Christianity as well. That just may be the way they teach children. Because
if you behave good with God, so He will return to you. So it's like, you behave. Return to you.
certain amount of responsibility.
With something external.
Someone is watching you at all times.
Yeah. Anyway, for me, the idea that it's within ourselves, both negative thoughts, negative states of mind, ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on, they lie within ourselves, and they're not permanent. They're not things that will be there forever and ever and ever, but they can be cleared up, they can be cleared away. So for me, that's very liberating and very empowering, you know, that you can do it. You can work on your own mind. And you're not helplessly at the mercy of some external forces. Of course, it's hard work, but it is possible. And so, you know, it doesn't mean that we are inherently bad, you know, like inherently bad, but ignorance is just a state of mind. I mean, people sometimes ask, well, where did it come from? Where did ignorance come from? Well, the Buddhist answer is it's always been there. It isn't that our minds were once pure and then somehow ignorance fell into our mind, dropped into our mind, and then we became ignorant. So it's not like that. We've never been free of ignorance. We've never been without it. It's always been there. But we don't need to worry about that. Buddha wasn't so concerned about that kind of question. He was more concerned with, okay, right now, this is where we're at. We have ignorance, we have these other problems, so let's do what we need to do to clear it up. And the way to clear up ignorance is the wisdom that understands emptiness. the wisdom that sees the true nature of things. And we have the ability to do that. We can develop that. And with regard to ignorance, the term ignorance can also be a little confusing because there are different kinds of ignorance. So not all, if you come across the word ignorance in Buddhist texts or Buddhist teachings, it doesn't always refer to the same thing. So it's a little tricky. One example of ignorance is ignorance of karma. Not knowing about karma, not knowing that if we kill, for example, if we kill another being, we ourselves will experience suffering in the future, even if the police don't catch us. We can get away from the police, but we can't get away from our karma. So, unless we purify, of course you can purify karma, but if we don't do that, the karma is there, and sooner or later it's going to come back at us. We're going to have some bad experience as a result of that. So that's basically what karma is all about. And if we do something good, something positive, something virtuous, like helping somebody who is in need, then that leaves a positive imprint, good imprint. And in the future, we will have some good experience as a result of that. So some people are ignorant of that. They don't know about karma. They don't understand karma. And so even though they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer, often they do the very things that will bring suffering, like they think hunting and fishing, you know, wow, this is great, this is so nice, this is so pleasurable, being out in nature and killing that deer, catching that big fish. So they think that's a source of happiness, a source of pleasure. So they're unaware that they're actually creating karma that's going to bring suffering and problems to them in the future. And also they're unaware that giving, being generous, sharing your wealth with others is a cause of happiness. So they think, no, I have to keep it for myself. I don't want to give it away, you know. Then I won't have less. So many people in the world are unaware of karma, and so they're doing the wrong things. Creating bad karma and not creating good karma. And so that's an unfortunate kind of ignorance. But that's not the kind of ignorance we're talking about here. So when we talk about ignorance, which is the root of all suffering, the thing that is the main cause of all suffering, it's not, of course that kind of ignorance is problematic and needs to be cleared up. But here it's talking about the ignorance about the actual way things exist. That includes our own self, I, me, who we are, what we are, how we exist, as well as others, all the other people around us, and all the things around us, all the things we see, and all the things that happen, all the different experiences we have. So everything, whatever exists, all of these things have a certain way of existing that we are unaware of, that we are ignorant of. And it's not a, we can sort of differentiate two kinds of ignorance in that sense. One is an ignorance which just doesn't know something. You know, it's like, I just don't know about the true nature of things. That's one kind of ignorance. But here it's actually not just not a knowing or not understanding, but it's a completely opposite way of seeing things, a completely wrong way of seeing things. So just to give an illustration of that, let's say there's somebody who doesn't know the population of Israel. You know, if you ask, how many people are there in Israel? And this person says, I have no idea, not a clue. So they're just ignorant about the population of Israel, just unaware. And then there's another person who isn't just ignorant about how many people there are, but has a completely wrong idea. Like he thinks there's 20 million people in Israel. Population of Israel is 20 million, which it isn't. I think I looked it up. It's only 8.5.
Wow, it used to be 6.
Huh?
It used to be 6 million like 10 years ago.
Well, things change. People have babies. Anyway, so this other person who thinks he knows how many people there are, but it's like he's completely off. He's completely wrong about that. and yet he really believes in that. Okay, so that's more than just ignorance. It's a complete misconception. It's a misunderstanding of the truth, right? Does that make sense? So in the case, what we're talking, the kind of ignorance we're talking about here, which we need to overcome to be free of suffering, it's that kind of ignorance. So it's not a simple case of we just don't see reality, we just don't see how things exist. But it's more than that. We actually see things, we think we know how things exist. We have a certain way of seeing things, believing in things, and it's completely wrong. Completely off. Yeah? Does that make sense? And so, so then to overcome ignorance, to be free of ignorance, it isn't enough just to learn something. Okay? So like the guy who has no idea how many people live in Israel, all you have to do is say, oh, there's 8.5 million people. And he says, okay, now I know how many people are in Israel. So that ignorance is cleared away. So in our case, the ignorance about the true nature of things, it isn't so simple as just, oh, Buddha says things are like this is how things are. And we say, okay, now I understand, now I know, now I don't have ignorance anymore. So it's not like that. If it would be that simple, then we probably would have cleared up our ignorance a long time ago. But it's more than that. Because we actually have a very deeply ingrained and habitual tendency to see things existing in a certain way, which is just the opposite, complete opposite to how they really do exist. And we cling very tightly, not intentionally, but just unintentionally, we cling very, very tightly to this wrong view of things. And so it's not so easy to be free of ignorance. What we need to do is, first of all, recognize this wrong or mistaken way that we see things. Be able to kind of take a step back from that and see, this is how we see things. And then use reasoning. This is, as it's explained, at least in the Gelugpa tradition. This is the one that I have studied mostly, the Gelugpa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. They say we need to use reasoning, logic and reasoning, to prove to ourselves that that way of existing is actually impossible. It's impossible for things to exist that way. So that's why it's not so easy to clear up ignorance. But it's not impossible. So they say that the process of eliminating ignorance requires a number of different steps. One is to learn about emptiness, which is the opposite of our ignorance. I've been explaining things how they do exist, as opposed to the wrong way that we normally think. So we have to listen to teachings, read books, but they need to be reliable teachings, because there could be teachers or there could be books that are talking about emptiness, but not in a correct way. They might be explaining it in a mistaken way. So then we would just end up being more confused. So we have to try to make sure we have really good teachers, good teachings, good sources of material. And we need to study a lot. Like in the monasteries, the Gelugpa monasteries, they have a curriculum that lasts for about 20 years. And they spend the first couple of years learning basic things, maybe about 12 years. 12 years study. So it's a bit comparable to primary school and secondary school in the West, right? So in Israel as well, like 12 years of basic education before you go to university. Okay, so they study for about 12 years learning basic philosophy, and then they study emptiness for 4 years. So they're like major, like, university level studies in emptiness. And And even after that, I remember once asking somebody who just recently finished his studies and got his Geshe degree, I said, "Oh, so now do you understand emptiness?" And he said, "No, no, no." Maybe he was just being humble. But I've also heard, yeah, sometimes they say, just when you finish your studies, that doesn't mean you don't study anymore. It's just the beginning. Yeah. You still continue. You can spend the rest of your life continuing to study, and not just study, but also think about, meditate on to get an understanding. So I hope I'm not scaring you off. But I'm just trying to point out that it is a difficult thing, even for those like the monks who are studying full time. Because sometimes people think, well, we're Westerners, or we're smart, you know, I've been to university, I have a degree, I have a master's, I have a PhD, I'm smart, you know, so I should be able to get it like that, you know. And then we find that it isn't that easy. Well, it's not surprising, it is a difficult topic. And it's not just because it's difficult to understand intellectually, but what we're trying to do is not just get an intellectual understanding. What we're trying to do is change the very way that our mind works, the very way that we see things. And we are so habituated to seeing things in this mistaken way. It's like we're addicted. We're like addicts to a wrong way of seeing things, and it's very hard to break that habit. I think that's what makes it so hard. And it's not just this lifetime, according to Buddhism. You know, it's not like only since we were born until now, but past lives as well. They say from beginningless time, countless lifetimes, millions, zillions of lifetimes, we have been seeing things in a wrong way. So it's really, really deep and strong and powerful, and not easy to break that habit. So if you find it difficult and challenging, don't feel you're stupid. Don't feel bad about it. It is difficult. And also they say it's not enough just to study. Of course we need to listen to teachings, think about, meditate on, and so on. But they also say it's important to do other kinds of practices, like purification. Purification, because if we have a lot of, you know, delusions, disturbing emotions, karma, and so on, and these kind of clog up our mind. And when we do try to learn about emptiness or meditate on emptiness, it's very hard. We fall asleep, we get distracted, our mind just goes kind of crazy. So they say it's also important to complement your study with practices for purifying karma, purifying, the negative stuff we've accumulated from the past. So we can do purification with like prostrations, practice of the 35 Buddhas. There's different practices, Vajrasattva practice and so on. There's various practices for purification. And also on top of that, accumulation of merit or positive energy. So that's like, we want to get rid of the negative energy that's clogging up our mind, but we also need to cultivate positive energy. I think of positive energy or merit like fuel. You know, if you have a car can go, but if the gas tank is empty, you're not going to be able to go anywhere. So you need the fuel to be able to get this car moving and going and take you somewhere. So I think of positive energy as like that. It's like fuel. It gives us energy to be able to use our mind in skillful ways and actually get some realizations. So there's other practices for accumulating positive energy, like giving, making offerings, helping others. So any good things, positive things that we do, virtuous things. It's a way of accumulating positive energy. So these are like complementary practices to the understanding of emptiness. Clearing away negative energy, building up positive energy. So normally the monks and nuns studying in the monasteries would be doing those practices as well. They do a lot of prayers and chanting and prostration. So their schedule every day consists of, prayers and other practices, plus listening to teachings and debating, discussing with each other and so forth.
Are they helping others as well during their, when they study? Do they go out and help others or not? No?
I don't know, because I didn't kind of stay in that kind of monastery. Probably not a lot, but they would be helping each other. I mean, if you're living in a monastery, you've got a lot of people around you, and it, you know, of course, it's encouraged to be kind and helpful, and they would share work and so forth. So they'd have kitchen duty, kitchen duty, you know. So you cook, get up early in the morning, make breakfast, serve your fellow classmates, and so on. So that, or cleaning the pots. So that's regarded as service, like service work, helping work. Yeah. I think I have heard some stories of going out and help. I remember once I was in Dharamsala and there was this big earthquake that happened in Gujarat. This was quite a few years ago. This huge earthquake. It was really bad, like 30,000 people were killed. Gujarat is just kind of southwest of Dharamsala. So I remember walking down the street one day and there was a big truck full of monks who were heading off to Gujarat to help, you know, with the relief there. So sometimes they are also. And also Kopan Monastery was organizing a lot of relief work for the earthquake that happened a few years ago, raising money and going out and putting up tents and giving food and so on. So sometimes they are doing that. So next point is the lineage of teachings on emptiness. Now, I don't know if you think this is very interesting or not, but it is useful to know where these teachings come from and how they come to us. So, the explanation is that, it says here, the Buddha turned 3 wheels of Dharma. And this explanation comes from a sutra called the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, the Samdhi Nirmochana Sutra, which is a Mahayana sutra. So the first Dharma wheel, this was right after he became enlightened, his very first teaching after enlightenment. It was 49 days after his enlightenment. He went to Varanasi. No, actually it was Sarnath. Anyway, that area of India. And he gave his first teaching, in which he explained the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. Okay, that's called the Dharma Chakra Sutra. So it's the Dharma turning wheel, turning the wheel of Dharma. I think the idea of turning the wheel of Dharma is Dharma, like the Buddha's teachings, are not something that he just invented, but rather they are like ongoing. Before Shakyamuni Buddha, there were other Buddhas. There have been many, many Buddhas in the past, and there will be more Buddhas in the future. So Buddhas come into the world, they teach the Dharma, and for a while the Dharma is continuing, and then after a while it's forgotten, and then another Buddha has to come in and teach the Dharma. So it's like a wheel, like, you know, turning that wheel again, turning the wheel of the teachings again, reviving these teachings in the world. So the first Dharma wheel was his very first teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and that was taught mainly for Hinayana disciples. That means those who wish to attain nirvana, who wish to free themselves from suffering, who want to get out of suffering and get to nirvana, state of peace, state of liberation. So those teachings were mainly, I'm saying mainly, not exclusively, because also those of us who follow the Mahayana need those teachings too. We also need to know the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, so that's part of our path as well. So the second wheel, second Dharma wheel, is when the Buddha taught the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And this, the first time he did that was on Vulture's Peak in Rajgir, like just now we read the Heart Sutra. So the Buddha was in this place called Vulture's Peak. You can go there today. Has anyone been there?
Yeah.
Vulture's Peak? Yeah. So you can go there and sit there and meditate on emptiness. And these teachings were mainly for Mahayana disciples. That means those who want to attain Buddhahood, who want to attain full enlightenment to be able to help all other sentient beings. And then the third Dharma wheel, it's not sure where that was taught. I've heard different versions. Some say Shravasti, some say Vaishali, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. And in this, each of these Dharma wheels includes certain sutras. But the third Dharma wheel is meant for both Hinayana and Mahayana disciples. Okay, so the three wheels are kind of like three different groups of teachings that the Buddha gave, meant for different types of people, different types of followers, different types of disciples. Because it said that there's this analogy that the Buddha is like a doctor. And just as in a doctor's office you find people with different kinds of problems. You know, one person has cancer, somebody else has a broken leg, somebody else has migraines. Okay, so you know, depending on what the problem is, the doctor will give different medicine, different, you know, treatment. It doesn't give the same medicine to everybody. And also, it depends on the person's age. You don't give the same medicine to an adult and a child, and how strong they are, you know, if they have a very strong body or if they have a very weak body. So you give different medicine according to the person and the problem and so on. So in a similar way, the Buddha didn't always say exactly the same thing to everybody. They said the Buddha can see people's minds and can see, you know, what kind of person this is and what is the best way to teach them and guide them and lead them. And so it said, like for example, emptiness. The Buddha didn't teach emptiness to everybody. Not everybody would be able to manage it. Some people would freak out. Some people would misunderstand it and go off in the wrong path, wrong direction. Okay? So this is why the Buddha gave different teachings to different people in different times, different occasions. So it's important to understand that. This may sound kind of boring, but if you kind of read different books from different Buddhist traditions, you'll sometimes encounter different ideas. And you'll think, hey, wait a minute, my teacher didn't say that. My teacher said this. So you can get a little confused or maybe even upset if you encounter different teachings under the title Buddhism. Yeah. But it's not a problem. Well, I mean, it could be that there's some misunderstanding there. That's possible. But it could also be that, you know, going back to the Buddha himself said different things at different times to different people. So you have to be really skillful. You have to develop this skillful ability to know what, you know, there's this whole subject that they study in the monasteries. They call it interpretable and definitive teachings, meaning that some teachings that the Buddha gave are definitive. That means this is the real thing. This is the Buddha's real message here. And then the interpretable teachings are those that you have to interpret them. You have to, you know, understand why the Buddha said that. So this is a whole skill, at least in the Gelugpa tradition. Huh?
Philosophically speaking, or, you know, you have to interpret in what way?
Well, this is a whole other subject, because also, I mean, from the point of view of the Prasangika Madhyamika, the highest school, the only definitive teaching is emptiness. Yeah, so when the Buddha talked about emptiness, that is the definitive teaching. Everything else is interpretable, even cause and effect. But that doesn't mean it's, you know, not right or anything like that. But Lama Tsongkhapa wrote a whole text on this topic of interpretable, knowing what is interpretable and what is definitive. But different schools also will say different things about interpretive and definitive. It's very complicated. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Buddha does say different things at different times, and so you have to be very skillful in knowing how to understand, and understand there's no contradiction. It's not actually contradictory. Yeah. Because the sutras are vast. You know, the Buddha taught for like 45 years. A lot of sutras. I mean, in the Tibetan, I don't know if you've seen the collection of sutras in the Tibetan tradition, but it's like 108 volumes. And they're not thin little books like this, they're thick books like this. So there's a huge amount of words from the Buddha. So it's quite an art to know, you know, how to understand them and how to relate to them. Anyway, we're going off the topic. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the teachings on emptiness were given in the second turning of the wheel, where the Buddha taught the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. What time are we supposed to stop for a break? I forgot.
I think now.
No? Okay. Okay. Well, maybe we stop for a break and then we continue after the break.